Chroma keying is the process by which we can separate a foreground subject from a background by filtering out a color or a range of colors. Now, you probably have seen this process when you watch your newscast, when the weather person steps in front of a map. It is also called green screening or blue screening. And those are the two most common colors to be used as screens in the background when we want to create this effect. The reason why we choose those colors is because they are the most not naturally occurring colors in nature, number one. So we're looking for either a pure green channel or a very light blue channel. And they are also the ones that are further from skin tones, which is what we usually want to key out, what we want to make sure, what we want to maintain within our shot when we're using this kind of an effect. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to take into account is the quality of the screen, the quality of the green screen that you have on your shot. So I have three different compositions here that show different setups for green screen. Sometimes we have really good lighting on the background. As you can see, the goal is to make the background as flat as possible. So to achieve this, you want to make sure that you light your background first completely and make sure that there is no gradients on that background as much as you can, of course, get to it. The second thing you want to do is you want to have your subject as far away as possible from the background so you can take advantage of depth of field to make that background even more evenly lit on the camera. That is ideal. So that's the ideal situation. In some other instances, you just can't get away from having everybody basically crushed against that green screen and not have the green screen so well lit because there are some shadow projections. You want to avoid shadow projections as much as possible. And then in some other instances, you have not even a green screen. You just have a set of colors that you want to get rid of. So how do we go about doing this? How do we go about removing these things? Let's start with the easiest version of this, which is the perfectly lit one, the best lit one. So in that case, all we need to do is simply select the clip that we want to key out. And let me put a background image behind that video so that we're going to have something back there when we start keying, sorry. And we want to go under our filters, and whether we go under effects and choose from the drop down here, or if we choose from the effects and presets up here, they will be under the keying section. Now you can filter out like we've done with other filters in the past and start typing the word key light. Key light. Now key light is the default keying filter that comes with After Effects, and it works really well. It's a good starting point for most, and actually ending point for most projects. So let's go ahead and drop this into that particular clip. Now, key light opens up the effects control panel, and we have the option to choose from here. We're going to start going from top to bottom until we get the results that we want. So the first thing we want to do is foremost thing is to choose a screen color. So to do that, I'm going to use the color picker, and I'm going to go as close as possible to our hair anywhere around here. Now, when I do that, you notice that basically all the green got dropped, most of it. You still have some spilling around here, so you see some greenish things around here, some artifacts. However, this is the final result as you see on the drop-down menu. Now, let's take a look to see what that actually did. When we go on that drop-down, we want to be jumping up and down on these different things to see the resulting alpha channel that we are creating, or the transparency information that we are creating with this filter. So let's start with, the first thing I usually do is I just go to status, and under this status, basically what I want to see is whatever is approximating the black is what's going to be completely transparent. Whatever is approximating the white is what's going to be opaque. And I want to get rid of as much gray as possible. So even though in this case, in the final result, we seem to see a lot of this pretty clean, you know, when we start moving the video, you start seeing some graininess around here. When you start scrubbing the video, you see grain around the film. And the reason for that is because, let me actually turn this off really quick, and you start seeing it on the white background. You see all that graininess. That is coming from that video, from the actual screen. So what we want to do, our goal is to get rid of all this. So how do we do that? Well, let's go to the status. Under the drop down, go back to status. And our goal is to eliminate the gray, like I said. So what we want to do is basically choose a different green. That's the first thing I would do. So let's reset this really quick. Go back again to status, to final result. Let's pick another green. Let's start with that again, see if we get a better result to start with. Go back to status under the drop down, and that's basically the same thing. So we're seeing that the green selection is not really working from that perspective. So let's go ahead and click on the swatch for the green color. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to start working with the green here to move around slowly until I start gathering more and more green without actually crushing any of my actual matte of the white area that I want to maintain. I want to make sure that I do not cut off on it. So what I want to do is slowly go ahead and play around with these values. Usually what I do is I go to the closest possible value to get me to my subject. I really don't care about these areas around here because I can always mask those out by creating an actual mask. And what I want to do then is as soon as I get to a place where I get enough black around my subject, I start playing around with the saturation of the color. And that usually starts basically crushing in those values, bringing them closer to the subject so that I get to a point where I am feeling pretty good about what I'm getting in terms of a mask. So let me go ahead and let's stop here for just a second, click OK. Let me switch from status at this point to screen matte. This screen matte is actually giving you the value of the alpha channel that you're creating. And as you can see, I'm getting some of the hair in here and over here, which is pretty good. Let's go ahead and switch this back to final result. And I see that my background is fairly clean. I see a lot of white area back there. And if I turn this on and I scrub my video, I'm not seeing any of the artifacts around here that I was seeing before. So if I simply play this back, I'm getting a fairly good, fairly decent, matte out of that green screen. So that works out really well. Again, taking into account that this started with a really well lit background. So that works really well. If you want to keep on fine tuning, for example, you want to bring back some of that hair that she had, that you lost on the actual matting process, you might want to just go back again to screen matte, and then you can start working with the screen matte values to basically crush the blacks and whites. So let's say if I start increasing my blacks, you'll notice that my blacks get darker, giving me a little bit more contrast on the edges. But that also gives me artifacts. As you can see, I start getting a bit of aliasing on my alpha channel. So you might be careful with how much you actually crush these things, and you can bring down the whites to make that a little bit more, make the white matte, the actual area that is going to be opaque, expand a little bit. So let's take a look at this again on final result. Do a quick preview again. That's a little bit more cut, perhaps too cut. So if you want to go ahead and make some of those edges a little bit softer, you might want to do a bit of pre-screen pre-blur. Let's increase that to about 2 or 3. Don't go too high on this one, because if you do that, basically you start bringing in a lot of blurriness around, which is going to bring back some of that background color that you actually eliminated. So don't go too crazy with this screen pre-blur, sorry. And just give some of that softness around the edges to bring it back and make it look a little bit more natural, sort of like that it's not as cut and that the actual character blends better with the background. Now, another way to sell this is obviously she is in front of the camera, the background is a little bit far away, so we might want to bring in some of that blurriness back to that because it's out of focus. So we want to go ahead and apply a fast camera blur or a camera blur, or there's plenty of blurs in this program. So I'm going to simply apply a fast box blur to my background, and I'm literally just going to increase the blur value to like 3 or something like that. And that automatically sells the effect. As you can see, maybe 2. And that she fits better with that background image. So that sells the effect quite a bit better than just simply having everything in focus. So that works well for this kind of screening. Now let's go and take a look at something that's a little bit more difficult, such as this. So in this case, what do I want to do? Well, first things first. When you have artifacts like this, it's sometimes impossible not to capture some of the things that are around in your scene. Like in this case, this pole and this grips and all that stuff that's holding the screen in place. The screen was really well placed, it's pretty flat. There's not a lot of shadowing on it except for the shadows that are being projected by our characters, our talent. So I want to get rid of as much as possible of those things. So in a quick job, what I would do is I would select the clip and I would apply a couple of masks to that. So the first thing I would want to get rid of is this side of the clip. So let me go ahead and with the clip, with the actual layer selected, go to the rectangle tool and drag a mask in the area that I want to get rid of. So now this worked well. I'm not seeing the items anymore. So your first inclination would be to say, well, invert that mask. Let's not do that. Let's change it by, instead of adding, let's subtract from the drop-down menu for the mode that the mask is going to use. So we'll use subtract, and as you can see, that subtracts that portion of whatever clip I am marking. Now let me go ahead and add another mask to the same layer on this side to get rid of this entire thing. So let's go ahead and apply that. Let's go ahead and select the layer, select the mask tool, and drag another mask over here. For that one as well, I am going to switch the mode from add to subtract, and there it is. So now I have a pretty clean, those two, by the way, are called garbage masks, and garbage masks are very common. It's something that you do. Seldom do you do a green screen or any kind of keying without having some garbage mats around so that you can actually focus on your on what you're trying to extract from the clip. So in this case, I want to do the same process again. Now you notice that I did it already here, but I'm going to do it again so that we can walk through it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the key light. I'm going to filter out for key light. There it is. I'm going to apply it to the clip. And then I'm going to select the green as I did before. Boom. So that selection of green worked out well, but I am seeing issues. The first issue is that I see some kind of artifacts here. There is some kind of dark from my clip. I also see some transparency on her jeans and on his pants. And there's some spilling issues as well. That spilling is basically what you're looking at. Basically what this is telling me is since I picked the green, there was green in those pants. A way to see if there's actually any spilling of that green. And it's natural that there's spilling because the light is bouncing everywhere on the scene. So there is some greenish hue on the fabrics. And what's happening is basically the key light is getting rid of all green. So that goes with it and makes it transparent. It's an issue, so we need to fix it. So in order to fix this issue, we don't work on final result mode. In this case, we want to work on intermediate result. And in that intermediate result automatically brings back all that green spilling that we had that we weren't seeing before. All that greenish hue is the stuff that has that basically key light couldn't get rid of. So we could go in and try again to work with our screen color, and let's work with the saturation to bring it lower if necessary, and that works pretty well. But I'm still seeing, I'm seeing transparency on her pants and in his pants, and so that can be problematic. Now let me go up here and see if that got rid of this up here, and it seems to have got rid of some of the artifacts that we had up here. Let's undo really quick. There it is. So it did get rid of that. Let's go to final result again to see. And yeah, it seems like it got rid of it. Now the issue now becomes this. What do we do with that? How do we bring that back? So let's go back over here to final result. Let me go ahead and go to intermediate result, sorry. And let's see how we can start playing with these settings. Now, I can go ahead and start working with the actual mask that I created again. So let's go to status and see what that's looking like. And I'm seeing that there's a lot of gray in their area. Also, there's some gray around gray halos around these characters here. So let's play around until we get a better matte. So how do I start working with these things? Well, there are options for increasing gain if you want to start playing with that, or reducing gain to expand. You can also work with clipping your matte by using the black and white clips. So if I start decreasing my white clip, you'll notice that I start increasing the amount of white that I am selecting. However, I am identifying that green screen to be a lot more evident. And so maybe that's not an option right now. Let's go back to 100% on this. And with that done, let's go ahead and start working back again with the color. Funny enough, most of the time, it works really well to have a color, to have the proper color picked up from the beginning. So let's cancel this really quick. Let's reset my filter. And this is not uncommon, what I just did, to go back and reset your filter. Let's go ahead and click this green right here, switch back to status, and start playing around with the color over here until I get most of that gray area gone. Now, you might be tempted to go, okay, I'm gonna go all the way down. So what happens is if you go all the way down, basically you're matting everything out, and then you're gonna have major objects, artifacts, and holes in your mat. So don't do that. Go slowly. Keying is not a one-shot deal. It's not something that you do and you're done. You usually have to go back and revisit several times until you get it right. So let's see if this works a little bit better. Maybe I want to increase my green here. That works well. Let's work with this for now. Okay, now let's switch this to the screen mat. And under the screen mat again, I want to go ahead and now I want to start clipping my whites, bring that in, crushing it in. Okay, and now I get a fairly clean mat, as you can see. Now this is a clean mat on the actual screen mat mode. Let's go ahead and go back to intermediate result and see what happens. I see now everything is clear. I don't see transparency around their pants, but I still see that green halo around these people. So there are two options. I can go again to final result and see what happens. And if I go to final result, let me see what happens with the green. Because the green is still there, what's happening is this is gonna give me some halos around the subjects. Now, there are several ways of working on those halos. If you have a clean clip, and by a clean clip, I mean something that you can actually sort of mask out a little bit more without destroying your subject, you can start playing around with the values for shrinking or increasing the amount of screen that you get. So if I go on the negative value under that screen shrink, you'll notice that I start reducing the size of that. And don't go crazy. Don't go like that, because now you notice that basically you're cutting off on your subjects. So go little by little until you get to a happy place. And 0.8 in this case worked out really well. Let me scrub the video, and this is another thing that you need to do. You need to keep on scrubbing to see the result of your mats in different frames during the duration of the clip. And I still see some issues here. So let's go back, and I'm gonna bring that back again to 0. And I'm gonna bring this back again to intermediate result. And I'm gonna maintain it under intermediate result. What I wanna do at this point is I want to introduce a new set of filters. So the first one that I'm going to introduce is called Refine Hard Matte. You find that filter under the matting options for filters. So if you go under that category, you have Matte Choker, and Matte Choker will actually just crush in your matte. You'll see, you just saw that by literally applying it just like that, it crushes your matte, and you basically get rid of the whole thing, but it looks a little bit too soft. I mean, it looks too almost like it's made with an actual mask. So let's remove that Matte Choker. Out of these, the one that works out the best for me is Refine Hard Matte. So if I click on that and drop it in there, by default, you notice that things change ever so slightly. Watch. But for example, I lost that hand here, but I did do well with some of this dark over here. So there's trade-offs that you need to do. I also lost some details here. So let's bring everything down to 0 up here and start little by little. That's basically how you start working on these things. So let's go ahead and feather these out to about, say, 2, 4. Just give it a little bit of feather. I'm looking at this area here. That's the change that I'm looking at around the hands and around the halos around her hands. So if I go to about, say 4, and then I increase the contrast, I might start seeing some of the changes. Shift edge, and perhaps reduce chatter a little bit. Now, if I click on decontaminate edge colors, that automatically also has an effect ever so slightly on the green that I have on my effect here. So let me turn that on, sorry. Let me reset this really quick and go back again. We were doing these things without the effect being applied. So let me turn all that off and let's start again. I'm gonna feather a little bit. So I'm gonna feather it out to about 2. Let's see what that does. Little bit of you can see the change, especially on the spilling. little bit. So let's go ahead and make that 2. Maybe increase the contrast to about 10%. Turn off the filter to see the results. That's okay. And maybe decontaminate the edge colors. And now you can see a major difference around her hands here. You see the jump, right? So with that done, let me go ahead and go back and revisit my key light. Once again, I'm not done with this. Maybe I want to shrink at this point. Maybe I want to shrink ever so slightly, not a lot. Actually, I went too far. Let me shrink it. 2.5. Maybe I don't want to get too soft of an edge either. But let's see. Let me jump different frames. This is looking fairly well. I still see some green spill. I see some green areas on their pants and their shirts and around here, shoulders and so on. So how do I get rid of that green stuff? Well, for that one, we use something called the Advanced Spill Suppressor. So that you find under the keying options, right here under the keying categories, and is the top most. So when you click on that and simply drop it, it automatically, just with the default values, you saw that basically the green went away. And so what it did is basically look for those values that are closer to the screen color that you had picked originally, and starts looking to see how to eliminate them and kind of basically bring back the actual color of the whatever subject you were trying to screen. So in this case, that's a fairly decent screen, for the purposes of this. Let me set it up over here. Let me see this. By the way, when you're working on these settings, you should always be working on the full quality of your video when you're screening. And when I play this back, let me go ahead and do a couple of, actually, let's start around here. Let's start where there's actual motion. Let me start at this point and create a short clip, a short render. And as you can see, basically I have a pretty clean mask, for the green screen. Basically green screen, the screen's gone in this case because my subjects are right against my background, and I'm not blurring that background. Now, where this gets really tricky is when you have something like this where there's no green screen at all, but there's enough of a color that you might want to be able to just drop. So in this case, we're going to be doing the exact same process. We're going to go use key light, drop it in there, pick a green. And in this case, what I want to do in that green is I want to change this again to status and see how I can go ahead and start working out my colors to gain a lot more black on the outside and maintain some of that masking on the actual subject. Now that's green. That gray, it's okay as long as I'm getting rid of most of this most of these little artifacts that I have in here on the sides. Let me go ahead and click OK on this for now. Isn't it funny how, look at the color of the green. You would think that's clear green. Never this dirt gray that would be masking the best. So that's why you want to start playing around with the colors, because it's seldom do you find that this gives you, when you click on this by default and say, okay, that's the green that I want to pick, you think that you picked a color that the program is going to like for masking. And when you go and start actually doing the status change, you notice that this is nowhere close to what color you wanted to choose or you should have chosen. So colors usually change. In some other instances, you start losing objects, like in this case, I started losing some of the details on the shoe. So that can be problematic. And if you have artifacts somewhere outside of the field of focus, the area of focus within your shot, then use a garbage mask in order to bring those back. So let me go ahead and bring this up like that. Actually, let me reset that again. Sorry, I want to pick another green. Boom. Let me just pick one here. And let's work on that. Bring that. Oh, sorry. Let me change this to status. I want to start with that. Let's start working with the green again with the color. Boom. Bring that in. That's good. Like so. Almost there. Maybe I want to start playing around with the actual color here and see what that does. Yeah, it gives me some more. I'm seeing some artifacts around here and around here. Now, this might not be able to be masked out unless you combine it with rotoscoping, which is yet another workflow that is common when you're trying to key out something from a shot. So it's a combination of all these things that we've been talking about so far in this module that will give you the best result. Let me just call it a day with that one. Okay on that one, even though I have some artifacts, but I would spend some time cleaning this up if I had enough time. Now let me go ahead and go to screen mat again, and you notice that the screen mat works really well. Let me go ahead and bring in my whites so that I am bringing that up, and that gives me a fairly clean break on the actual mat. Actually bring the black down a little bit and crush this in a little bit more. And let's go ahead and work with this, see what that gives me. Let's go to the intermediate result, and that works fairly well. Okay, but I'm losing some detail on the shoe, as you can see. So I could either do a quick rotoscope to match that shoe and actually follow it, which we could do with a mask track if we want to, or we could start playing with the other filters that we were working with before. Let's go to, let's say, matte, refine hard matte on this one and see what that gives me. Let me collapse this guy really quick and start playing around with this. Maybe I want to bring in the advanced spill suppressor as well. Turn off the matte, see what happens. Maybe with the spill suppressor activated, I want to go back to the key light and play around with the color. See if I can bring that back a little bit. And so I see that I'm bringing that back, but I'm seeing some of the edges appearing. So that's where my other filter would come in, the second filter that I added, the refine hard matte. And then with that one, I can control how much I can feather that in or out from the actual shot. Feather this out and try to blend in the shot a little bit better. Look at the arms and see if that works well. So this worked pretty well right now, and I was able to bring back the area that I had thrown out by because it was green and it was being cut out by the key light. I was able to bring it back through a combination of both bringing that key light back up again, changing the green a little bit, using my refined hard matte to actually clean the actual matte, and then making sure that I remove any green spill by using the advanced spill suppressor. So this is a crash course on green screening or key lighting, which is basically chroma keying, as I said from the beginning of the video. And it is a common process to be able to pull out a subject from background. As you saw, you don't need to have one specific background color. The color, it's called chroma keying because it uses any color. You can key any color. The key takeaway, once again, for production is that if you're going to be creating a key color, make sure that you have your background as evenly lit as possible, that you have your subject as far away from your background as possible so that they're not projecting shadows, so you can light your subject separate from your background. And make sure that you avoid any gradations or any shadowing, like I said, on the screen in the background. And that way, that's the fastest process. The best lit screens produce the best results. So keep that in mind.